CEE,
Central Europe Explained,
an IDM podcast series
powered by Erste Group.
Episode 46, Timisoara Unveiled, a journey through multiculturality, art and communism. Timișoara is one of the 3 cities holding the title of European Capital of Culture in 2023. Situated in the Banat region of Western Romania, it is often considered to be a quintessential European city due to its rich multicultural, multi-ethnic and multilingual heritage. Timișoara has an extraordinary history, influenced by the Ottomans, Austrians and Hungarians. For instance, the Viennese style of architecture serves as a reminder of the Habsburg era. And even in present times, Timișoara continues to be shaped by German, Hungarian and Serbian influences. Welcome to CEE. I'm Sophia Beiter and I'm happy to host this episode about my trip to this year's European Capital of Culture. Visitors of Timișoara quickly realize that multiculturalism constitutes an integral part of the city's identity. This is also reflected by the mayor, Dominik Fritz, who is of German descent. When he initially visited Timișoara in 2003, he was mesmerized by its diversity and the potential it held. In 2020, he became the mayor of the city. To Dominik Fritz, Timișoara, with its multicultural character, embodies the spirit of Europe.
Timișoara is a European city because for centuries, people of different religions, confessions, ethnicities and native languages have been living together here. And they do not only live next to each other, but they live together in a productive community. Timișoara was always a very innovative city. And the main idea of Europe, that diversity is a strength which can grow innovation and prosperity, has been lived for centuries here in Timișoara. This is something we are proud of, but this is also something that is relevant for the future. It is a concrete example for the successes of Europe, and this is what we need in these very difficult times.
The multicultural essence of Timișoara is also evident in its art scene. The 3 national theatres, a Romanian, a German and a Hungarian one, coexist under one roof, showcasing the harmonious coexistence of diverse cultural influences. Ovidiu Mihaița, an artist born in Timișoara, is a musician, actor and playwright. His plays frequently incorporate multiple languages, mirroring the multilingual reality of the city. Ovidiu finds inspiration in the diversity of his hometown.
Regarding this subject, Timișoara is the best town in country because it has this multi-ethnical assembly of inhabitants, mostly German, Hungarians and Serbians, and afterwards Jews, and nowadays Italians and all kinds of refugees. But the basement it's Serbians, Hungarians and Germans. And we had exactly like this, a family of Germans and Hungarians, and another mixed Germans, Hungarians, and my family was 100% Romanian, so I lived through them. We had also Serbians in the same building, and you could hear all the languages there. For me as a theater guy, it's really cool to have 3 theaters when I was a student, and I can go and I've played in all of them. I played even in Hungarian and in German, even though I'm not a speaker. And yes, it's somehow you feel that there, of course, if you're looking into history, it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. They built lots of things. The culture was moving around. We had, for example, Bartók and Liszt playing in town back in the day. So starting in ancient times, we can speak about it, that it's a cosmopolitan city. It's like a bubble of Eastern Europe, I would say. And this situation, you cannot find it anywhere in Europe, to have a town with theaters in 3 different languages. Yeah, I think it's really cool. And even in our group, in the theater group, we're speaking so many languages. We have Hungarian speakers, Serbian speakers, German speakers, and of course English and French and whatever, but we have the local languages. And yes, we have it also in the shows.
This diversity is also visible in the program of the European Capital of Culture. Oltea Zambori works as a director of communications for Timișoara 2023. She explains what kind of image the city aims to convey of itself.
Well, I hope that Timișoara presents itself very well, but I also hope people will understand very well what we are trying to communicate here. That Timișoara has always been a big cultural center, even if a lot of things were happening underground. Timișoara is a city for niche cultures, for music, for jazz, for rock, for visual arts, and especially for small or medium communities. But when these communities come together, everything will sparkle, like you can see these days in your short visit to Timișoara. Everything the curators did for the cultural program for Timișoara 2023, it was focused on diversity and focused on this unique moment that Timișoara lives in with all these multicultural events and all these ethnics living in Timișoara, and everybody comes together to the same umbrella that is the cultural program. Basically, everybody is trying to pinpoint this diversity. You can see it in exhibitions, you can see it in musical programs, even if they are in philharmonics or in big festivals. You can see it in film festivals, you can see it everywhere. This uniqueness in diversity, which is maybe a paradox, but this is what is happening.
With regards to the Capital of Culture program, Timișoara also wants to provide a platform for young, experimental artists from Central and Eastern Europe. In particular, the Art Encounters Biennial, with this year's title, My Rhino is Not a Myth, that is incorporated into the Capital of Culture program, has set itself the goal of integrating many young artists from the region. Notably, not only the artists, but also the curators of the exhibitions are young. Georgia Tidurescu is one of the 7 curators that prepared the exhibitions of this year's biennial. At only 25 years old, she is a very young curator who specializes in exhibiting young artists from the region. She observes how recent crises influence young artists.
Well, when COVID started, everybody started working like crazy here because all of us were inside a house and they had to occupy time and there was no little job to do in the meantime, and a lot of the works were based on that. Absolutely. After that we had like a boom of COVID-based exhibitions everywhere, and when the war started, somehow it was a sensitive topic to approach in the first few months, and we didn't necessarily tackle that. But now I can see that people are now trying to raise awareness on that, and we are including a lot of Ukrainian artists. I'm based in Bucharest, so I got to meet quite a few Ukrainians there. So they have an initiative and people join them quite a lot, and they support that.
But not only are artists influenced by recent crises, they are also affected by the communist heritage of Eastern Europe. In this context, Timișoara holds a special position, as it was the first city in Romania to rise against the communist regime under dictator Nicolae Ceausescu. The revolution, initiated in Timișoara in mid-December 1989, subsequently spread throughout the country, culminating in the execution of Ceausescu in late December of that year. Playwright Ovidiu Mihahitsa recalls how he experienced the revolution back then as a child, growing up in Timișoara.
So when it started, I remember perfectly. We were on the playground and my parents told me a revolution started. I never heard about a revolution or anything like this. And we were looking through windows and we could hear the gunshots. I said, "Wow, there's a war!" And I couldn't, and I couldn't believe my ears that it's really happened. And the next days, we were somehow hiding in our apartments with no lights on. And at a certain moment, my father said, "We have to go to the revolution. We have to do it. That's it." My mother didn't want it to. But me and my sister, because I have an older sister, said, "All right, it's a revolution. We have to go." We went together with my father in the Victoria Square, in the center of the town, just in the middle of the place. And we could hear the firearms, the gunshots. And it was a huge wave because it was really crowded. It was a huge wave of people going backwards, running, and my father took us and we left and said, "No, this is a real danger. We don't have anything to fight with." It was quite a mess, and we went home, and 2 days Ceausescu got caught, and that was the end of it. And I could feel this touch of liberty, so it ended so all of a sudden. Somehow you couldn't realize that it happened. It was not prolonged war, It was a few days, and afterwards silence. I still remember this, that in the Christmas day, in 25 of December, they shot Ceausescu dead, and I always can remember that touch of liberty that we felt. Even though we were kids, we were having on our arms the national flag, and we wore it with pride. So, and when we started the school in January, we teared down the first page from the books with Ceausescu, and we got down on the walls his face, and we were not needed to sing anymore the national anthem, and we were rebels and said, "Yes, let's take back what's ours." What's ours? Nothing. Liberty. Where's the liberty? And after a few weeks and few months, said, the TV program started to change. There were commercials, new products, Coca-Cola, wow, I don't know, Adidas.
Today, Ovidiu Mihaița runs a unique museum in Timișoara that offers a special perspective on communism. The museum is called the Communist Consumer Museum and exhibits everyday objects of communism. It resembles a typical apartment from that time, filled with a peculiar assortment of consumer goods, many of which were manufactured in Romania. As an artist, Ovidiu continues to be influenced by communism, despite having experienced it only during his childhood.
Communism, unfortunately, didn't stop. It's still alive among us, on the streets, in the institutions. Not everywhere. I think you can see it also in parks when you're looking at a statue. Yes, unfortunately, it's related to it. Without wanting necessarily to include it in what I'm writing or what I'm doing, it's still there because it's a problem that we have, and we cannot get rid of it only with the help of time. In this matter works for us. This is the time when time is on our side, It will disappear slowly, but I hope it will happen during my lifetime. And I also feel that it's present in others' work, not everyone, of course, but there are artists, musicians, and whatever you choose. They have, I think, the same way of thinking as me.
One of the emerging artists exhibited at the Art Encounters Biennial is Mariana Albantova, a young visual artist from Sofia, Bulgaria, born in 1990, 1 year after the revolution. Her installation, titled Cleanse, features various objects alongside an accompanying video. While the primary focus of this art piece revolves around the moral hygiene of human consciousness, it also touches on themes such as corruption and COVID. Interestingly, the communist legacy subtly permeates her work, not as a central theme, but rather through the materials she uses.
So in my work I'm using different appliances. I'm using some natural things like stone and wood, but at the same time the white tiles that are symbol hygiene somehow, because especially those tiles that are normally used into a kitchen or bathroom or in the hospitals. At the same time, the tiles that I'm using are produced in a really famous Bulgarian factory, Izida. They have 100 years history, and they stopped to work in the early 90s. The tiles that was produced in the factories, I found them in the basement of my grandparents. I didn't have chance to speak with them about that because they passed away. But when I found them, I found something like a lot of tiles that were with defects. And I started to research about those tiles and the factory Izida. And then I found a lot of information about that. There were 3 types of those tiles. And with the tiles with defects was the possible way to buy tiles for the who were poor. And back in time, in the 60s, 70s, even earlier in 50s, the people have access to buy, but depends of even if communist time in Bulgaria, where normally all the access in that communist time was for all of the people, of course, it's not exactly like that. So my grandparents, they bought amount of those tiles with defects for any reason. They need it, they have it. And I found them and I worked with them, and I think they're really beautiful with all their defects.
Curator Georgia Tidurescu says that this kind of influence of communism connected to family history is common among young artists in the region.
A lot of people who come from the region still try to see that perspective, even if they didn't live it necessarily. But they look into personal archive, into family archives, and they include that part quite a lot through their lens now. So yeah, it's still an important topic now.
Georgia Tidurescu's colleague, Cristina Stoanescu, is another young curator of the Art Encounters biennial team. She explores the interconnection of art and politics and studies the art scene from an institutional point of view. Her research encompasses the evolution of the Romanian art scene pre- and post-1989 revolution. She observes that even today, the art market in eastern parts of Europe seems to operate differently compared to Western markets.
Maybe in the Western market there is kind of a ritual of how things are happening and how galleries are growing or how galleries are expanding even now in the digital era. The Western galleries and the large galleries really function in this kind of capitalist logic where the largest galleries and the largest institutions were able to kind of begin the discussion on NFTs, for example, and they were also the first to abandon it, while the other one I'm kind of recuperating after it. What I see in Romania, and cannot talk about it being very representative for Eastern Europe, is that there is also a large opportunity to reinvent the system of how artists work within a market that is and isn't really there, of artists working with galleries that are and aren't galleries, because in the lack of institutions that would support or have like an acquisition, a stable acquisition program, galleries become something hybrid. They start doing residencies, they start doing publications, they take on very many institutional roles that exist in the West but do not really happen at the frequency that the artist here would need it. I understand, especially from the artists that have been in this biennial from Bulgaria, from Hungary, that things are happening at different speeds and in different ways in Romania. So I think even the idea of the Eastern image of how to describe the art scene is very different from one country to another. In fact, we know very little about each other in the region. Everybody's been looking towards the West. So we have this missed translations between countries in terms of art theory, in terms of which contemporary artists are working besides us, in terms of how the art scenes look in different countries.
When it comes to the heritage of communism in the work of young Romanian artists, Cristina Stoanescu identifies several different approaches. Some artists choose to reject this heritage, while others seem to more actively engage with it in their artworks, seeking to understand their roots and the connections to the present, even if they never lived under communism themselves.
I'm actually looking at artists my age, so born in 89 or just too young to really properly understand what the revolution and the turn 89 meant as a lived event. I'm trying to see if they refer or they kind of look towards that turning point or during the communist age at all. My hypothesis, again, at the moment, because I have not an informed study, is that many young generations in the 90s and 2000s almost desperately looked towards joining a more international dialogue, and then maybe discarding a bit a part of their communist past that at some point maybe wasn't even their past because they haven't lived through it. I've learned about the 89 revolution and about from my parents and from history books, and it's always been a bit mysterious. Even the 70s and the 80s are still a bit mysterious in terms of art history in Romania. So my hypothesis is these artists searched for joining a more international dialogue, but I see more and more even younger artists who were born in the 90s kind of trying to recuperate that in their work. So for example, you have an artist, Ioana Sisa, who is now doing a great series. She's documenting it so nicely on her Instagram page. She's doing the ceramics with the Ceausescu couple and the bear, which of course is a symbol of this URSS, URSS in Romanian, and the communist past, and then putting this snippets from Romanian television in the 90s and 2000s that are kind of representative of a very wild capitalist entering the country age. So it's interesting to see maybe that younger generations, so late 90s, early 2000s, are kind of having that in their discourse now.
Communism appears to exert a subconscious influence on numerous artists, impacting them without necessarily being explicitly addressed in their works. Conversely, the recent topic of Timișoara as the capital of culture is actively explored by some individuals. Playwright Ovidiu Mihaița, for instance, delves into the capital of culture as the central theme of one of his plays.
It's called Grand Hostel Timișoara, and it's about 2023, when Timișoara is the European capital of culture. And the action takes place in a tiny hostel where tourists are coming from all over. And basically it's a 100% comedy about the situation because there are lots of funny things about being a capital of culture. There are also a lot of tourists joining the show because it's played in 11 languages, not only Romanian, it's also German, English, whatever, even a little bit of Chinese. That was the last I did, and now I'm writing a new one for the next year 2024, when Timișoara will not be anymore a capital of culture. And it's called Adunarea Generală a Locatarilor, so the General Assembly of the owners of a building, let's say a rough translation. And they're having some elections for the new president of the building, and I hope it will be a 100% comedy about the current situation of Romania and especially of our hometown.
That raises the question of what will stay after 2023. Can the title of European Capital of Culture yield lasting changes and benefits for artists and society as a whole? Ovidiu Mihaița expresses the hope that it not only provides a platform for established artists, but also offers emerging artists opportunities for greater independence.
It's for the first time since many years Romania didn't have a proper exhibition of Brâncuș, for example, or Victor Brauner, huge artists. We didn't manage to bring them here before. And yes, this is the display of, maybe a vulgar display of power. But also it's a chance for independent artists, of course. I hope they will manage afterwards without state money, because unfortunately most of independent artists in Romania, even though they call themselves independent, they rely almost 100% on state money or money from the local authorities.
According to Oltea Zambori, the director of communications, the Society of Timișoara has the potential to also benefit in the long term from the title of European Capital of Culture.
Well, maybe first benefit is that we can grow our kids with better knowledge of what's happening around them. We can learn, because I read yesterday something very nice that said that people that travel more are cured of nationalism, people that read more are cured of racism, and generally people that go to more cultural events, they start being more tolerant and more open to new ideas and to people around them.
I'm very happy to have had the opportunity to personally experience the multicultural atmosphere, vibrant art scene, and rich history of Timișoara for a few days. And I would like to thank all the guests on this podcast episode for sharing their insightful and valuable perspectives. For this episode's recommendation, I have chosen Maria Nalbantova's artwork Cleanse, which was mentioned earlier. Its clean aesthetics and multi-layered themes intrigued me, and I'm grateful that Maria provided further insight into her work during our interview. You can find a link to her art in the episode's description. Thank you for tuning in to this CEE podcast episode, and I highly recommend exploring Timișoara firsthand if you have the opportunity.
This was CEE, Central Europe Explained, a podcast series produced by the Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe. If you enjoyed listening to us, make sure to subscribe to the IDM podcast series on your favorite podcast platform. Additionally, you can explore our other work on our website www.idm.at. If you have any feedback or if you're interested in collaborating on a podcast episode, please do not hesitate to contact us through our social media channels at IDM Vienna, or write us an email to idm@idm.at.
IDM Podcast. Institut für den Donauraum und Mitteleuropa.
Institute for the Danube Region and Central Europe.
European perspectives. Regional actions.
Cooperation and expertise since 1953.